Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. And we are back with more Fantasia Fest coverage, this time going over The Beast Within, which those of you who know us and know the channel know that this was probably something we were definitely going to do our best to track down and get because it's a werewolf movie. And yeah, we love our werewolf films on this channel. That's absolutely one of our mainstays here. We try to check out any and all of them, no matter how great or poor they end up being. And this one actually had some pretty decent stuff going for it, I would say. I mean, like, it didn't look that bad from the trailer. It looked like it had, a little bit of gravitas to it. You have people like, I know he hasn't really been in anything too mind blowing since Game of Thrones, but Kit Harington stars in this one. It seems like it's kind of an isolated story. We didn't really necessarily get from the trailer a specific time period, but it definitely seemed like the sets and everything they were dealing with were of a pretty strong caliber. So going into this, I had a lot of positivity. Luke, how did you feel?
I was right there with you on this one. I did check out the trailer before we watched this one, and I got to be honest, it from a production standpoint, this looked like, okay, well, this isn't a big budgeted film. It felt like that. Whereas, like, we have some intricate set pieces here. It looks rather interesting. Like you said, more of a closed off story. And I love when they kind of add that element into it because you kind of get really can deep dive into our characters and really open them up. So, this one certainly had my attention, obviously being a werewolf movie and looking like it was a little more serious than what we usually do get. When you look at those smaller tier werewolf movies, they kind of have that tongue in cheek. This is going to be more cheesy fun, but this did not feel like that from the trailer. So, going into this one, I went in really positive, thinking, hey, we can really open up these characters. I think we can get some great atmosphere with the woods and really see what we can do here. Now, did it live up to those expectations? I gotta say it did not,
No, it did not. Yeah,
unfortunately.
this was really, really unfortunate and pretty big letdown for us. And I am all for a werewolf film, kind of taking itself more seriously and being sparing with the werewolf. I'm fine with that. And that's very much what this film is. This is a very serious story that is kind of trying to frame, I guess, without giving too many spoilers away, like metaphors over what this beast is. And, that's great. That's dandy. You can make that work sometimes, but I just feel like this movie had such an identity crisis for the entire runtime. Like, there's so many things that I question about just why our characters were doing certain things and what it accomplished based on the information that we get, in the, I would say, final few minutes, because this does have a twist and it does kind of turn things on its head. And in my opinion, that twist isn't shocking, it isn't interesting, it just creates more holes and more questions and ultimately leaves you feeling completely unsatisfied.
Yeah, my word for this is unsatisfied, to be honest. Because looking at the idea of a werewolf, yes, that can open up several different avenues in terms of what kind of storytelling you really want to do here. And there's so much potential on the table here. Like I said, from a production standpoint, this looked rather intriguing. Like we were really going to be able to tell an interesting werewolf film with, like you said, some gravitas to it. But going into this one, when you get that kind of closed off story and you're dealing with a smaller cast, one of the big things that I'm going to need in this film is tension. And to me, I didn't feel that here. I think there are a couple scenes in here that do build some atmosphere. There's a particular scene that I absolutely adored, where they're in the woods. You have Noah, our one character on one side, and you have our little girl character on the other side. And I thought the scene there, it's nighttime. We have some fog. It looked really well done. And there are quite a few scenes in here that I'm like, they did a great job here. But, you know, they had a hard time sustaining that tension for me. And when you're telling the type of story that the Beast Within is, at the end of the day, once you lay all the cards out on the table, you're going to need a lot of tension in this film for this thing to work. And for me, when you only have those little scenes that work like that, and then you kind of go through the motions for the rest of them, and with this film, I would say unsatisfying and very safe. They don't really step outside of the box. There's so much potential here, what you can actually do, what you can accomplish. But it seemed like at the end of the day, they were just afraid to, and they kind of went with a safer story that we do see more regularly with werewolf films.
Agreed. Yeah, they really do. I feel like ultimately, and not to disparage the filmmakers or anybody involved in this too bad, but it does feel like they thought that they were being much more clever than the story actually was. And I think that's probably the most irritating piece to this for me, is because they don't necessarily do anything that outside the box, like you said, but they think they are, and they treat the audience like they are, and like we're not able to telegraph everything that's going on. And I think the ultimate piece to this that was the kind of the ultimate sin, the major sin this movie did for me was, yes, I've kind of hinted at it. The werewolf isn't in this much, but the werewolf when it is actually pretty good. Like the design, the prosthetic, everything they're doing is really cool and actually pretty well done. The way it's lit, the way it's all put together, and it just feels like the ending takes all of that and just tosses it out a window. And it leaves you with this movie where it's like, we are kind of waiting for this story to get started. Everything is kind of set up, set up, set up. A little bit happens, and then, okay, third act, let's get into it. Let's start getting some intensity going. Like you said, the tension just isn't there. There is one element of tension that I kind of enjoyed within the house in the third act with the mother and daughter, where you just see something in the background. And I thought it was really cool looking, and I was really curious to see what more they were going to do like this. Like if we get into the cat and mouse thing, but it quickly moves on from that. And then it just turns into what it turns into. And by then, I just threw my hands up in the air and said, man, what a waste. What a waste. So much potential, but it just did not work on many levels for me.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in this film, I'll say there's so many glimmers of hope where it's like,
Mhm.
maybe we're getting somewhere with this. Like you just mentioned, there's a scene within the house in that third act. I gotta say that scene works perfect.
Mhm.
You know, it's one of those things where I'll say at that point, I was all in. I was like, let's see
Mhm.
where this is going to go. And you know, again, it plays it safe. It doesn't really step outside of the box. Doesn't capitalize on some of the tension that it's able to build from scene to scene, and it just falls flat. You know, performance wise, I think there are some. You look at Kid Harrington. I'm familiar with Game of Thrones, and when you're telling these condensed stories, you really want that range for these actors. And I'll say Kid Harrington with our little girl actor. Her name's Willow in the film. I think there's a couple of sentimental moments in there that do work, but again, we don't really feel that deep relationship with these character dynamics, especially when you're only dealing with it's what, like four characters at most, I think, in this entire
Mhm.
thing with the family dynamics, and they present some intriguing ideas that they never fully capitalize on. It's one of those things where you can really tell this condensed story and really build that tension, really explore these character dynamics. And it just is more of a superficial level of terms of storytelling. They don't really deep dive into anything. When they do present, they have the time to do it. They just don't really go anywhere with it. And especially when, again, once you lay out all the cards and you know exactly, you really got to dive deep into those character dynamics and how this family works and the tension between characters, even when we don't have the werewolf. And, I'm a big fan of sparingly using a werewolf in a film because I don't think when you use it in overabundance, I think it becomes less special. So, for me, I had no problem up until what we get of this thing of, how much we do and don't see of the werewolf. I will say, there's like a brief transformation scene in here that is for me absolutely terrible. It didn't work at all. It's like it's probably what 10, 15 seconds to be honest, but
Yeah.
it's real eye rolly. It really falls into those basic motions of how you would see a transformation scene in terms of a very low budgeted film in, CGI, just it doesn't really work for that. So, overall, the werewolf aspect of it was rather underwhelming. There are glimmers of hope in this thing that just never really capitalized on. Character dynamic wise, I don't think anyone lived up to their full potential in terms of acting. I've seen Kit Harrington in Game of Thrones for several several seasons. And he does have a range, and he does show it off a little bit in this film, but he's never really given the opportunity to really extend upon what we can actually get. There are only those small scenes that work here, and especially with the subject matter, you leave a lot on the table here.
Yeah, and one of the things that I gotta say that I also found to be a bit frustrating, and I almost didn't want to mention this, but I feel like I kind of have to because it kind of went into what you were saying with Kit Harrington's range. This is a story primarily, I think, entirely told from the daughter's perspective. And, a lot of times I'm cool with that. That works. But I felt like we are left in the dark on so many things for so long throughout this movie that it just gets anguishing after a while, where you're just like, okay, let's get some more information. And then by the time, like I said, you do get it, and we have kind of a moment where it's like, okay, I think I can kind of understand maybe Kit Harrington's about to actually become a character now instead of just this kind of corpse that walks around and wears a fluffy jacket. It's like he just has these moments where things just like switch, and you're just like, okay, well, that was unexpected, I guess. And then once the reveal happens, it's like, wow, they really poorly telegraph that. I like you understand it right away, but it's like, oh man, that is just, again, they thought they were more clever than I think they had any right to. I just think that they needed to spend more time with this script. They needed to spend more time on this idea, really flush some things out, and honestly, just give us more meat on the bone here, because again, it just feels like we're kind of picking at scraps after a while.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I'm going to give this a proceed with caution. I don't think that this deserves a slash it, just because again, it shot composition wise, the effects for the werewolf when they're there are great. It's a beautiful film. And again, I don't necessarily think that the actors are that bad. It's more or less just the characters they're given. So it's like there's a lot of working pieces here. It's just all put together very poorly.
Yeah. I'm gonna second that with you as well. This is a proceed with caution for me. Again, this isn't a totally abomination of a film. Production wise, this had my intrigue. It's something where they set the table so well in terms of my expectation that it just became so underwhelming. This being a werewolf movie and having a smaller cast, a condensed story, actual some really fancy shots in here that really do build some tension. I was expecting more from this one. So, Kit Harrington is on the sideline for a good chunk of this film, where when you have someone like that, you really want to make usage of that range, that actor, and really tell the story. And what we're getting here, you really do have to do a character deep dive, and they never move among or past that superficial level of just the basics, the mechanics of what we would get in a story like this when it's presented fully for you. Um, you know, the werewolf, it works in the spots that we get it. It's sparing. I was for it, but then what we get by the end of it, it just doesn't work. So yeah, proceed with caution here. Not the worst that I've seen in terms of werewolf films, but certainly something where if you go in expecting what we expected, you're certainly going to be underwhelmed.
Yeah. Alrighty, guys, that's going to wrap us up here for our review of The Beast Within. Let us know if you are still planning on checking this one out. I mean, give us your thoughts and opinions. Maybe Luke and I are being a bit too harsh on this one. Maybe you guys were way more intrigued with the story and just what it presents as a whole. But yeah, maybe you're on the same side with us on this. So let us know down below. And yeah, we will be back with more Fantasia Fest reviews as we wrap up our coverage here. And yeah, more videos to come. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, gonna slash your ass. 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 Splattercast, gonna slash your ass.